Hello and welcome to DG's Game Awards ceremony. I have 12 categories with 5 nominees each, so let's find out who the winners are. What game had the best art direction in 2023? My nominees are Alan Wake 2, Final Fantasy 16, Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Stars, Lies of P. And the winner is... It's Hi-Fi Rush. Come on, you knew I was gonna say that. All these other games, they're beautiful in their own way. Sea of Stars, probably my favorite looking pixel art game. It's beautiful. I love the colors. I love all the blues and the orange. Lovely. Final Fantasy 16, one of the best looking games ever. I love how they use the scale of the game to amplify the way that it looks. It's just incredible, awesome. Alan Wake 2, very unique, very creepy. I put it on here above Dead Space, which I feel like kind of goes for a similar thing. There's a lot of visual things that really mess with you. I think that's pretty awesome. And then Lies of P, just everything looks fantastic. So if you thought Bloodborne looked pretty cool, you probably think Lies of P looks pretty cool. It's a little bit more obviously in the, I don't know, steampunk direction. Anyways, Hi-Fi Rush. It might be my favorite looking game in terms of like the menus and just the way that the characters are all animated, the colors, how everything's moving, like all of this fits into the direction visually of this game is pretty much everything I want from a video game. I don't really know, like before this, or similarly, Persona 4 started this for me where I was like, oh man, this is visually what I want a game, Persona 4 Golden I should say, is visually what I would want a game to look like. Like we don't need to go in this realistic direction. We don't need to go in some gritty direction. We don't need to make very strangely cartoony things. But this is more like, this almost takes like an anime direction, which I don't even watch anime. So that's not even where this is coming from. I just think that this art style is like perfect. And I love every aspect of it. Great job. What game in 2023 had the best sense of discovery? Here are my nominees. Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. What was I doing? Ho ho ho, what do we have here? I guess I gotta kill it. Cassette Beasts. I love the curious feeling of discovering a new creature and then considering how you could add it to your team. There's so many cool ones to find. Blasphemous 2. You're always within reach of a new ability or a secret area tucked away in this well-crafted and sprawling map. It's backtracking done right. Baldur's Gate 3. The possibilities feel endless with a map this expansive, yet somehow every inch has something interesting in it. How? Dave the Diver. From unique events to new fish to new areas to new plants to new weapons to new sushi recipes, there's always something to explore. And the winner is... It's Zelda? Come on, I feel like I got two obvious ones here back to back. All of these games do discovery in a different way and to differing degrees of excellence. The game that I almost picked here is Dave the Diver because it's just super fun to explore a little ocean area. You're always discovering new fish, new plants, new weapons, new items, new dishes, new recipes. There's just constantly just stuff everywhere and you're constantly in a state of discovery, it feels like. But it didn't quite get there, you know? It doesn't have that, you know? Obviously Baldur's Gate, you've got a huge sprawling map. There's plenty to discover, whether that be a fight that you might end up in accidentally, or you're finding treasure, you're finding buried treasure, you're finding different little buildings to go in, or like different ways to enter certain areas. There's plenty of different things to discover. There's also discovery in oneself. Cassette Beast does a great job as you're exploring the world. You see off in the distance, you see a new cool creature and you're like, you know what? I wonder what would happen if I tried to combine that with this or if I want that on my team, what might it evolve into? We also have Blasphemous 2, one of the best Metroidvanias ever in my opinion. I think it does a great job of letting you kind of find things along the map, whether it be little hidden areas. Sometimes you gotta slide under something or break down a fake wall. That's always awesome, love that in games. Or you're discovering things that you can't necessarily interact with yet, and then you have the awesome map tool that lets you pin things on it so that you can revisit it at a later time as you look at the map and you're like, oh yeah, there was something there. I love that. It's a great game. But the winner It's Zelda. Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like at the core of these games, the point of these games is discovery. So how could this not win this category? The point is that you're in a constant state of wandering around aimlessly and then realizing that you're not wandering around aimlessly because you're constantly finding things that are interesting. Whether that goes way down to the tiniest of things where you find a random ass rock and it becomes interesting because you pick it up and there's a Korok under it. Or you shoot up into the sky and then all of a sudden you've discovered a gigantic new island to mess around with, that there's probably multiple things to discover after your discovery. Every discovery leads to another discovery. There's no like single discovery. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is basically the Discovery Channel. So it wins this award. What game balanced planning versus execution the best in 2023? My nominees are
Wild Frost, Baldur's Gate 3, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Persona 5 Tactica, Armored Core 6.
And the winner is Armored Core 6. Yes, you might have thought that I was gonna say Baldur's Gate on this one, but you know what? I'm not gonna do it. It was a very close second. I had to really think about this one. Of course, Baldur's Gate does this excellently. You have what feels like an endless amount of opportunities, whether it be going into a conversation, going into battle. For the most part, this applies to going into battle. You have so many ways that you can set up your party or set up the environment to then attempt to execute on something. Of course, it's not always going to go your way, but that's part of why this balance is so good. There's not some flawless system here where you can just rinse and repeat. You're constantly having to think on your toes after making a decision. I feel like I can put Persona 5 Tactica and Wild Frost in a similar spot, not quite to the grand scale of Baldur's Gate, them being more tactical games, Wild Frost being a card game, and Persona 5 being a top-down, like, tactics style game. They both do it super well. And then we have Zelda. The planning and execution aspect isn't really about fighting in this game, whereas this category would normally apply to that. More so, the planning and execution here is crafting things and hoping that what you're building is going to let you execute on your plan and you can actually arrive at your destination or solve the puzzle. That, I think, is done very well here, but there's also aspects of that were slightly annoying to me. That helped it get into the nominations here, but it definitely could not be the winner. Now, I do have to say one thing. I gave Armored Core my win here, but I have to say, in the last week or so, I picked up my final game of 2023 that is going to be on the tier list, that was not part of any of these nominations. Actually, it got into one of them, but I'd already done this nomination. That's Cobalt Core. And I kind of think I would have not only put Cobalt Core on here, probably in place of Zelda, but I think it might have won this category. So I'm gonna give a shout out. I make the rules here, you can't tell me what to do. Shout out to Cobalt Core. Similar reasons to Wild Frost because it's a deck building roguelike. It does this better than every other deck building roguelike except Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is still number 1. I'm kind of starting to think that Cobalt Core is number 2. And I think that if you like this genre at all, you should really check this game out. It does a great job of helping you build your deck. You're using multiple characters. You're trying to synthesize all of these decks together. There's so many cool things, and there's different ships, and there's different ways to combine characters with your ships and different artifacts, and there's so many different things to plan for. I think they pull it off really well. So shout out to the honorary winner, Cobalt Core, but in the case of this category, I gotta give the win to Armored Core 6, which really surprised me. I've never played a mech building game at all, so I didn't know really what to expect. I was like, I don't wanna be in menus all the time, that's boring. It ended up not being boring because it's just so visually interesting at the same time. Like I have my wacky looking orange and cyan colored mech and I'm putting parts on and off and everything changes so drastically when you change stuff and then you're looking at all the stats. So basically the reason that it wins this category is because when you're fighting certain enemies or like on certain missions, you realize, oh, I'm hitting wall after wall here. This is kind of hard. This is kind of hard. There's actually one boss very early on that just freaking walls you real hard if you're not paying attention and you don't swap out your parts. But once you do that, you're like, oh, I need to play this game differently depending on what the enemy is. And the execution always feels good. It's got that sweet, sweet FromSoft feeling of accomplishment when you take down some of these enemies. And it's awesome, and it feels even better because you have to plan it specifically beforehand and you're constantly changing up your gear to make sure you have the right stuff for the right battle. So that's awesome. So congrats to AC6. What's the most innovative game of 2023?
Nominees are
Alan Wake 2. Musicals, horror, hilarity, storyboarding, psychological damage, all in my video game all at once? How? Lords of the Fallen. They really took Dark Souls times 2 literally. 2 worlds overlapping. Nice. Cocoon. What if we put a world inside another world inside another world? Also, no dialogue? Sweet. Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Grab a thing and like turn it green and just put it anywhere. Also, backtracking is now illegal. Street Fighter 6. They found ways to get someone like me into a fighting game. That's some wizardry right there. And the winner is Alan Wake 2. So we got Lords of the Fallen. It's really cool in that it doesn't pull it off perfectly, but I feel like it's at least trying to do something that's different, which again, other games have kind of messed with dimension shifting and stuff like that, but this game literally has 2 worlds in coexistence at the same time that you can somewhat easily swap between. There's obviously resources and stuff you have to use to do so. You can't just freely do it. So that's really cool. I really appreciate that. It makes you look at the level design in a way that you normally wouldn't in a game like a Souls-like game. Cocoon is awesome. It just does puzzles in a very simple and clean, unique way, I feel like. All you're doing is pressing one button to interact with things, but there's so many different ways for you to use that one button. It made me think about the level design. Again, it's kind of similar to Lords of the Fallen, even though it's not at all similar. How do I make my one button interaction make all of this other stuff work? So that was pretty cool. We got Zelda. The innovation here is pretty obvious. The fuse mechanic is pretty insane, the way that they use that. The ascend, which to me, ascend is like probably my favorite new mechanic in a game in a long time. I wish it was just a default thing in every game because I don't want to ever not have it. Like imagining playing like the Elden Ring DLC now and you can't just whoop somewhere. That kind of sucks. That kind of sucks. Then we have Street Fighter 6, and I literally put it on here because I feel like it had a lot of accessibility controls and just ways that it innovated on the genre to try to get new people in and actually appeal to more of a casual crowd like me to a fighting game. The winner is Alan Wake 2. So what's innovative? Not just the use of all these multimedia aspects, but how well they implement them. Because I know they've done this before. They've had live action stuff with Quantum Break, which I did not play either. And they had like live action stuff in Control, which I did play a little bit of, didn't really like it. So you've got these aspects of the game that they're pulling in that usually are not part of a video game, like just straight up playing music at the end of a chapter, which I was not expecting at all. I think that's something that did happen in Alan Wake 1, didn't know that until after. That was an awesome experience, especially the first few times it happened. I was like, man, it just really helps you just sit in this moment. It's so weird how that works. And then you've got the TV commercials, and then you've got the freaking event that happens that's live action. There's just so many ways that it ties in other things, and also it's innovative in the way that it presents its narrative using your board to deduce information. It just really presents the story in a way that I feel like no other game has made me interested in the story in the same way this did, and I appreciate that a lot. I feel like that comes down to Remedy being innovative in the genre in a lot of ways, so that's why I'm giving it this award. What game had the most enjoyable puzzles in 2023? Here are my nominees. Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. You see that thing in your head right there? Yeah, that squishy blobby thing. Use that. You'll figure it out eventually. Humanity. Imagine the path to victory in your head and then meticulously craft it on the board. Then just pray it works. Cocoon. This game made me feel smart. Most games don't accomplish this. They make me feel stupid. Other games bad. Sea of Stars. I love the use of verticality and perspective mixed with some isometric Zelda energy. It made areas more fun to navigate. Alan Wake 2. You know, sometimes examining the environment for clues to a little riddle is exactly what I want to do. And the winner is Cocoon. Awesome. This is a game I didn't even think I was gonna like in the first place. I almost didn't play it. And here it is, winning an award. Awesome. Sea of Stars, I really like how they pulled off puzzles. Listen, I'm somebody, I don't like puzzles. Let me just put that out there first of all. I do not like puzzles. They're basically my least favorite part of every video game outside of reading text. That's probably my lowest. That's my least favorite thing. Second least favorite thing, puzzles. Anything in this category is doing something pretty amazing for me to even remotely care about it. Sea of Stars, it has pretty basic puzzles. They're not too confusing, so that's awesome. But also, it uses its environment in a cool way. You can climb, you can use the depth of the map in a way that a game from this perspective usually wouldn't use, and I really appreciate that. You have a lot of freedom of movement despite the locked-in camera, and that's probably why I enjoyed the puzzles so much, because they're pretty simple. You could really easily compare them to top-down Zelda puzzles, but in a Zelda game, there's instances where you'll do something, and then to go and interact with the object that you just moved, you have to then go around a fence, and it just wastes 2 seconds. And this game doesn't really do that. It like lets you solve an issue and then gives you a quick movement option back to where you're supposed to be going. So it flows really well, and that's why I like it so much. Then we got Zelda, which I could have given this the award, absolutely. The reason I didn't, again, I said it earlier, I don't like building things. That's also another thing I don't like. You know what, that's probably right above puzzles, maybe below it actually. I don't like building things. I know there's ways with the auto builder to kind of get around that a little bit, but I didn't use the auto builder much. To be honest, I didn't get that until like halfway through the game, so that might have had something to do with my feelings. Maybe if I got that way earlier and I used it more, I wouldn't have had as much of a problem with this stuff, and then I would have picked this as my winner. That's possible. I don't like building things. I don't like how tedious it is to physically try to move things and put them together, and when they don't work, then you have to rebuild them. Just like, I don't like that whole aspect. You put it together, you use it, it works. That puzzle structure, that's awesome. Like, that makes this game the winner to me, but like I said, it gets knocked down a peg because I don't like the actual putting it together aspect. That kind of ruins a little bit, but I love the feeling of thinking of something, crafting it, and executing on it in that way to solve a puzzle. I think it's awesome. I think Tears of the Kingdom does it better than pretty much anything. Considering how many different ways you have to solve certain things, and the fact that there is absolutely never just one solution to a puzzle, that's also awesome, and I appreciate that greatly. We've got Humanity, which I didn't play a ton of. I probably played 4 or 5 hours of it. At some point, I was just like, okay, this is too much for me. I really appreciate what this game is doing, but I can't. I could. I just don't want to keep going, because I'm somebody who doesn't like puzzles. But if I was, freaking go play this game. It's so clever. It lets you like set up these boards with different actions and stuff, and then you kind of let it play out. It's kind of like Lemmings, and it's also kind of like Captain Toad, where you're using the perspective of this little world you're kind of moving around, and you're like, how do I make this go there? But then if that does that, then I have to do this. You almost have to work backwards from your goal, and that's really cool. I think it pulls it off really well. But then we have the winner, Cocoon. It wins by being extremely pleasant and simple. Also, it makes you feel smart for doing everything, because everything feels obtuse enough that you're like, is that how you do? Oh, that is how you do it. Oh man, wow. Like, that's just the feeling I kept getting throughout the game. I just kept feeling like I was the smartest person ever. You're like, that doesn't make sense, does it? But do I just put this and then I do this and then that is the answer. It's always pretty simple, and there's not a lot of things that you have the ability to even do. So there's not a lot of options you necessarily have. It's just about kind of using your brain to figure it out. I never had to look anything up, but there was a few things I got stuck on for a bit, but it never got frustrating ever. Never frustrating. That's why it wins, because puzzles frustrate me constantly. Every other game on this list, I got frustrated at some point. And definitely games that are not on this list, I got frustrated at some point. Cocoon? No. Also, I just realized I forgot to mention Alan Wake. So the reason that Alan Wake's on this list is because I love just finding little notes and then it being like giving you a little riddle, and then you go and you kind of explore the world to figure it out and use context, just finding containers and it being like, maybe you should, if you did this and this and just the little way that it relies on you having knowledge of the environment that you are currently in, or that you've previously kind of looked around, and then you can take hints from it and be like, oh, I remember something about that, let me go look there, and then you'll find something else interesting. It kind of also, the puzzles kind of lead you around the world in an interesting way and let you find other interesting things, so that's pretty cool too. What was the most relaxing game of 2023? Here are my nominations. Cassette Beasts, Dave the Diver, Cocoon, Sea of Stars, Super Mario RPG. Sometimes you just want to sit down, have a good time, and not worry too much. Games can totally help do that for you, especially these ones. There may still be stressful moments, sure. You've also got peaceful, jolly music, a slow pace, and serene environments. Mix that with game mechanics that don't require too much out of you, and you've got a recipe for relaxation. The winner is Dave the Diver. Speaking of things that I don't normally like, I don't play games to relax. I like to be stressed out and challenged. I think if you are someone who appreciates more calm, relaxing, zone out, don't really think or stress too hard kind of games, these are good choices. I'm not going to expand on each one individually because I don't really think there's anything uniquely interesting to point out here. They all just let you kind of sit back on your couch, relax, and you don't have to worry too much while you're playing them. I appreciate that, even though I don't usually care about that. And I think Dave the Diver does it the best for sure, with the peaceful music, and you're just like swimming around. It's a little bit stressful, I guess, because there's sharks, and then you have to like stressfully serve a restaurant. But I mean, outside of that, it's pretty much just you're doing a lot of casual management of things, and also just it's mainly just the swimming around and the music. It just gets me going to a calming place, and that doesn't usually happen. So congrats, Dave the Diver. What game generated the most smiles of 2023? Here are my nominees. Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Look at how much fun these little guys are having. How can I not pop a grin at this? Alan Wake 2. Wait, I thought this was a horror game. Why is it so funny and weird? Remedy was not afraid to be silly. Hi-Fi Rush. Wholesome, funny, and charming all at once, wrapped up in presentation that oozes personality. Baldur's Gate 3. The situations you can find yourself in, plus the way they're written and acted out, always manage to make me chuckle. Dave the Diver. Seeing a man thoroughly enjoy making sushi for others is not something I thought I'd be so happy to experience. And the winner is Hi-Fi Rush! Wow, I can't believe it. Listen, all these games have brought a smile to my face multiple times, okay? This is a weird category. No, it's not. It's not a weird category. I hear you saying, that's a weird category. How is that a category? What does that even mean? You know what it means. I was sitting there playing the game by myself, which normally I'm just sitting there like, but these games, what they did for me and what they can do for you is this. That's how people smile, right? I don't know. Almost gave this to Mario because it's just a joy to go through. There's constantly just silly things that they're throwing into the levels with all the wonder features, and it's like, oh my, what's gonna happen next? It's very jolly. Alan Wake 2, which you're like, that's a freaky, weird horror game. Why is that there? Because it's funny. Remedy has some comedic writers, I'll tell you that. And it's not always like overt comedy. It's just like, that's so weird or awkward or like, what is even going on? Quite a few laughs. Laughs count as smiling. Laughing at a game is like double points in terms of most smiles generated. And that happened plenty in Alan Wake 2. Similarly, Baldur's Gate, plenty of funny writing in here. Plenty of wacky situations that you can find yourself in. Plenty of things where you're like, is it really gonna let me say this? And then you do, or like you say something and then somebody says something insane back to you. Then of course we have Dave the Diver, which there's some funny dialogue in here. There was little cute animations and stuff, heartwarming situations that happen a few times. Also, I just love sharks, and fish are cool, and like swimming around in an ocean. It just makes me smile. I just like doing it. And with the pleasant music, it's just like, I feel like you could just casually smile throughout your entire playthrough of this. Now, the winner though, by a mile. This category secretly was designed with Hi-Fi Rush in mind, because not only is it making me smile because there is clever writing. I think the writing in this game is fantastic. I think the acting in this game is fantastic. All of the characters are interesting. There's a lot of heartwarming stuff, similar to Dave the Diver, but you also have just hilarious people, also hilarious situations. There's lots of like physical humor that's funny. It's almost Jim Carrey-ish with the main character Chai. I always saw it as Borderlands humor, minus the cringy stuff that it really started to delve into. The aspects of Borderlands humor that people don't like isn't really here, but the rest of it that people do like is here. I think that pulls it off great. Also, just constantly smiling because I'm literally just listening to great music and tapping my feet and bopping my head as I'm playing. I'm just constantly smiling. I can't play this game and not smile. It's impossible. This game totally runs away with this category for me, for sure. This game is a giant smile. It just projects a giant smile on your face the entire time, and you cannot get rid of it. You can't. What game had the best voice acting in 2023? Here are my nominees. Final Fantasy 16.
Rule stopper.
I heard it again. Someone is calling me.
Damn it, lad. That doesn't mean you have to listen.
Alan Wake 2.
Brought you the Heart Witch. Show me the terror. Saga pushed the heart through the hole in the sign. This was the key.
Hi-Fi Rush.
It's crazy. Looks like we found our AI.
This is a screensaver, Chai.
Armored Core 6.
The PCA, they're coming.
Looks like we got a little too eager, 621.
Baldur's Gate 3.
It's like she could throw me over her shoulder and carry me to safety. Should the need arise.
I'd hug you if it wouldn't scorch your skin off.
And the winner is Baldur's Gate 3. Now listen, I actually had Final Fantasy 16 written as the winner here, and I scratched it out, changed my mind, put Baldur's Gate 3. Also, I absolutely could have picked Hi-Fi Rush, because it is excellent in this category as well. Also, so is Alan Wake 2, and freaking for some reason, the voice work in Armored Core 6 is also fantastic, and it sticks out even more in that game because you never see anybody's face. You don't see any of these characters. You see some characters represented by like the mechs that they're in. Sometimes that doesn't even happen, and you're literally only hearing a voice. You have nothing to associate it with. And all the voices are just so interesting. I love them in Armored Core 6. Alan Wake, the acting's great. I think that especially Alan Wake himself does a great job with the voice acting, especially with the narration. That's some good stuff. The fact that Alan Wake and Armored Core are as good as they are, and they're the clear 4th and 5th place on this list is crazy, because the voice acting in Final Fantasy 16 is incredible, but the problem is that it's not consistent. That's why I changed my answer as it being the winner, because Clive and Sid, 10 out of 10. Like, those two were the reason I had it as my choice for this in the first place. They're top tier. The thing is, there's also characters like Jill being at the low end. Some of the side characters are really not that great. As far as Baldur's Gate goes, all of the main cast and your companions, they're all great in terms of their voice, but then also a lot of the side characters. So I just feel like quality-wise, overall, they nailed the voice acting. And then of course, like I said, the voice acting in Hi-Fi Rush is freaking awesome. You've got Chai and Corsica and Peppermint that all do a fantastic job. A few of the other characters also great, but they do stand out to me. Lovely cast overall. Not really anything negative to say. Baldur's Gate just does it at a bigger scale, I feel like, and that kind of gives it the edge. Overall, I don't really think that you can go wrong here. The voice acting this year was pretty top-notch, I will say. What game produced the best atmosphere in 2023? Alan Wake 2. It's creepy, sure, but there's also moments of delusion and confusion that really give this a unique overall vibe. You never know what to expect. Dave the Diver. One of the jolliest games I've ever played. Where else can you casually pet whales, savagely chop tails, and ravenously boost sales? Resident Evil 4. Horror, action, and silliness are hard to mesh together this well. The balance of tension versus feeling like a badass is struck perfectly. Hi-Fi Rush! Everything is bopping to the beat, everything is exciting, everyone is almost always having a good time. The energy is infectious. Dead Space. Claustrophobic, lonely, and downright disturbing in almost every way. It really beats you over the head with fear at every corner. And the winner is... Hi-Fi Rush. Oh, another one. Dang. We got Dead Space. Very spooky. I like how dark it is, but then you also have like the glow of the blue in a lot of areas to highlight certain things, and it really has a great sound design, which most good horror games do at this point, like the other two on this list. The sound design in particular, though, in Dead Space does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of hearing things in the distance. You can kind of hear footsteps, or you hear like screeches, or you hear like engine combustion, or like doors slamming. Like there's lots of that ambient noise in combination with how dark and just creepy everything is as you're wandering around and how isolated you are. I think it does a fantastic job. You got a similar-ish game, Resident Evil 4. It builds up tension really well with certain enemies coming on screen or surrounding you or just being around you and making weird noises. It's not as claustrophobic as Dead Space, but that does happen in quite a few areas. It's a good all-around pick for this category. Then we have Alan Wake 2, it has this aspect of like what is going on. You are constantly being messed with. It feels like your brain is like being toyed with as you're playing. At the same time, you feel like you're going a little bit insane. So that totally adds to it. You've got all the other aspects of the things I just said for the other two games done very well, but then also you're just like, what the fuck? What? On the complete opposite side, man, Dave the Diver is so jolly. Uplifting game, puts you in a good mood. And that's because of the atmosphere. It's just so peaceful, calming, and jolly. You know what also is that? At least the jolly part. I'm gonna apply jolly to both of these games. Hi-Fi Rush, dude, this is like, again, the perfect game for this category and what it's asking. Everything is moving with you. Everything is musical. Everything is exciting and happy. You're in this groove constantly. You just want to keep moving. What is atmosphere if not this surrounding feeling that you have? It's just this immense surrounding feeling of energy. And I don't know if another game has really made me feel like that. Other rhythm games, like I'll get into it, but I'm not like excited because this game is just popping with color at the same time. Everything's moving. I think that's really part of it. It kind of becomes subconscious as you're playing. You're not really thinking about the fact that everything's moving and he's snapping as you're playing, and like every character around you is bopping to the beat, and the buildings are moving and the signs and the lights are glowing in a certain pattern. Like everything is just so energetic and I love it. What game had the best boss fights of 2023? My nominees are Lies of P. If you showed me some of these bosses out of context, I'd probably believe FromSoft made them. Why are they all so cool? Final Fantasy 16. What if Godzilla and God of War had a goddamn beautiful baby? Apparently, you'd get this adrenaline-filled joyride. Remnant 2. Dimension shifting and puzzle solving mid-boss fight is rarely this interesting. Lots of creative and unique ideas here. Hi-Fi Rush. When you and the boss are both timing everything you do to the beat, it really gets you going. Can every game do rhythmic boss fights, please? Blasphemous 2. Some of the best 2D boss fights around. Look out, Hollow Knight. Slick animations plus satisfying movement equals greatness. And the winner is... Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16 is really special in this regard, so I wanted to give it some love. Otherwise, we've got Remnant 2, which is a pretty solid game, but I think the bosses do stand out as some of the better parts because they have some really interesting designs going on. There's this weird boss you fight where you have to shoot certain aspects of this cube that's moving that has weak spots, and it'll crush you if you get crushed by it. It plays with a lot of different things. There's also a boss that like goes underground and shoots things at you from underneath, moves around you. There's another one that swaps dimensions on you, which is pretty crazy. There's a lot of things that are really unique to this genre, I think. Then we got Blasphemous 2, which all the bosses feel fair. I did have to redo a couple of them quite a few times, but most of them it was 2 to 3 tries and I was done with them, which is perfectly good. I like when they are difficult but not bashing your skull into the ground hard. I just think in terms of 2D action platformers, Metroidvanias, it's got some of the most solid bosses in the genre. Then I feel like there's a significant jump up on the list for these top 3 here. Liza P is gonna be like, it would be the 3rd place here, which is crazy because these bosses are freaking awesome. They're somewhat indistinguishable in a lot of cases from Software themselves, which that's the highest praise you could possibly give something to me. I think all of them have totally fair attack patterns. You can also like bust some of them up by blocking or parrying them, whatever it's called. You can kind of change up the boss. A lot of them have second forms. You've got all this, it's just super tense with how good the combat is in Liza P. It's no surprise that playing against these bosses is a lot of fun because playing the game is just a lot of fun. And I think the bosses are designed well. Then we got Hi-Fi Rush, which again, like totally could win this category. It's so, I never knew how much I wanted games to go follow a beat as you're playing them that aren't just rhythm games. It's done so well. Like all the bosses are moving to the beat, they're attacking to the beat. You know when to dodge because they're always gonna attack on beat. Also, the boss music itself behind the bosses, totally adding to the fight, obviously, because it's very important. It feels like the music is tied to the boss. It's part of the boss, which is so cool. I love it. And the boss designs themselves, they're freaking awesome. Most of them have like these bombastic personalities that you're kind of like bantering with mid boss fight. It'll kind of pause, give you a little tension between the two of you, or something crazy happens. I love that. I love everything about the boss fights in this game. Just incredible. But then we have the winner, Final Fantasy. These boss fights are quite a spectacle. I think they pulled off what God of War pulls off all the time. I think there's just so much energy and enthusiasm in them, and you just constantly feel awesome no matter what you're doing. People think that QTEs make things worse, and I don't necessarily disagree. I just think in this game it totally works. Just the scale of the fights. Some of them you're in like a human form and then you will kind of proceed to go into giant mode, and then all of a sudden you've got a totally different scale for the fight. There's a different power dynamic. All of these bosses that you're fighting have very unique visual appearances, and you also like do totally different kinds of gameplay in all these fights too. Some of them you're like running around and dodging things. Some of them you're literally flying through space. There's a lot of variety, and even though not 100% of it is purely action focused, the spectacle of it is so strong. This is gigantic scale. This is just like insane. What is going on screen right now? Of course it's gonna win best boss fights. It's like the best part of the game. What game had the most fluid movement in 2023? Here are my nominees. Spider-Man 2. First swinging, now gliding. Moving around feels so good you forget you're supposed to be saving people. The Finals. Thrusting yourself upwards at a collapsing building while simultaneously getting in and out of a gunfight is thrilling. Armored Core 6. You would think that being a gigantic tank made of scrap parts would control like a nightmare. Think again, it's marvelous. Blasphemous 2. When your abilities are equally as fun and as useful in combat as in platforming sections, you did something right. Ghost Runner 2. Not only is this game's mission to make you feel cool, but it wants you to look cool while doing it. And the winner is Ghost Runner 2 in a very competitive category. So we have Spider-Man 2, which like the whole draw to these Spider-Man games is being Spider-Man, flying through the air, swinging, climbing things, jumping off things, zipping through things, whatever you're doing, you're constantly in like this state of flowing through the air or the map. Even if you're running on something, it still feels smooth. Everything's great. No complaints really about the movement in this game, and it still didn't win. So that's what we're dealing with here. Then you have the Finals, same thing, dude. For a shooter, like a competitive shooter, I don't think there's ever been a competitive shooter that has felt this good to move around in. This is number one. The jump pads, the flying through the air, how the gravity works, scaling a building or falling from a building as it's collapsing, that feels good. You've got zip lines, you've got things where you can like charge through and destroy walls. There's so many things here. And even with all these abilities, these wouldn't matter if the core of just straight up walking from point A to point B was not as perfectly fluid as it is. And it is. It's number one. Like I'm saying, there's no other shooter that feels as good to move around in. Competitive shooter, I should say. We got Armored Core. Dude, it's from Software. Of course it feels good. Also, you're literally just a giant mech and you're like flowing through the air. How is that even possible? I don't know why it doesn't feel weighed down and awful and clunky. I thought it would. The dashing, thrusting forward, even if you're just moving on the ground and you're like a tank, it's still smooth. It doesn't feel awkward to move around in at all. It's awesome. Then we got Blasphemous, which probably on par with like Hollow Knight in terms of what it feels like to move around in. I'm saying that a lot, move around in. What does that even mean? You know what it means. The only thing in terms of like Metroidvanias that I would put above it is like Guacamelee. To me, that's still number one. I think that people that like Hollow Knight really should look at Blasphemous 2. 100%. But then we have the winner, Ghost Runner 2. The amount of ways you can move around, you can like blink towards things, kind of like Dishonored. You can use slow motion to like slightly adjust your movement. You're jumping from place to place. You're bouncing off walls. You're freaking zip lining to things. You're constantly doing dashes. You're like dashing through attacks to like cut down enemies. The whole game is about moving around, and it does it perfectly. Also, there's a motorcycle in this game. And there's this thing you can do where you eject yourself off of a motorcycle going like 200 kilometers an hour and then grapple hook yourself back to it to like dodge lasers. It's one of the coolest things ever, to be honest. It's pretty awesome. What game had the best combat in 2023? Here are my nominees. Lies of P. When you look like you play like Sekiro and Bloodborne, I'm already in. When you actually literally do, I'm in love. Armored Core 6. Not only do the shooting and movement options feel buttery smooth, but the customization of your loadout on top, oh boy. Resident Evil 4. You've got scavenging, crafting, tense situations, tight shooting, and roundhouse kicks, and it pulls off every aspect perfectly. Baldur's Gate 3. Whether it's direct assault, messing with the environment, or using your brain to come up with something insane, Larian says go for it. Cobalt Core? Listen, deck building roguelikes are incredible. Don't you dare try to say otherwise. This might be the best one since Slay the Spire. And the winner is Lies of P, in a very competitive category once again. So Armored Core, like I've kind of said, it feels fantastic to shoot things in this game, combined with how you move around. It's got a very special loop of how you dodge things and then firing. You have 4 different weapons going at the same time, but you're like intentionally using them at specific intervals to stun your enemy in a certain way or hit a certain weak spot. Awesome stuff. You got Resident Evil 4, where you got this cool arsenal of weapons. They all have a lot of great feedback. They all work super well. The enemies are fun to kill, watching their freaking body parts go places, and then how they get destroyed when you shoot them. Some of them like evolve into other things, and then that makes the situation even more tense. You've got the roundhouse kick, which is just an awesome way to finish enemies off. Just a very satisfying game from beginning to end in terms of how it feels to shoot things, basically. I feel like if there was a runner-up here, it would probably be Baldur's Gate. I love the combat in these games, and by these games I mean Divinity Original Sin 2 and now this. By far my favorite part of these games is the fights, and like everything I do is designed to like get myself to fight pretty much everybody. Like how can I create an excuse to get into a battle with this person reasonably is basically how I play these games. I love how dynamic it is. I love controlling 4 different party members, figuring out positioning, figuring out what kind of attacks you're going to use, what order you're going to use them in. All of that planning and execution is just excellently done here. Yeah, that's why I love Larian. Then we got Cobalt Core. Similarly, I just love planning my deck. There's a lot of different characters you can mix and match with the ship that you have, with all the different cards in each deck and how they work together. And it's just a lot of fun to pull off all of these different combinations to take down your enemies as you progress through the game. And the combat's awesome. It's really simple. You're just a ship fighting another ship. Sometimes there's stuff in between you to kind of get in your way, help you, or hinder you. You're just kind of moving around using movement and attacks to take down your ship before they kill you. It works super well and I like it a lot. But the winner has to be Lies of P. I mean, my favorite thing to do in a video game is hold a melee weapon, usually of the large variety, like an axe or a great sword of some sort, and smash other enemies with that weapon. That's what I want to do in a video game. And this game does that to near perfection, just like all of From Software's games do, and that's why I like them so much. I don't know how to not bring up From Software when talking about this game, because it's extremely obvious that that's the inspiration. And it's also, to me, after playing this, obvious that it is the #1 game to have pulled off actually doing that. It has some unique things too, also with mix and matching your weapon with its handle and stuff, trying to make more unique weapons, and that's really cool. But yeah, it plays super well. I loved I just love an action game where everything is kind of heavy and is very responsive. You're swinging your weapon, your enemy swings their weapon, you're moving out of the way, you're learning patterns, you're figuring out people's weaknesses, how to take them down, all that. Perfect. Great job. Fantastic. Thank you for watching, and if you agree or disagree with any of my choices, make sure to let me know. Also, I just want to say that 2023 was the best year for video games of all time, and I refuse to change my opinion on that. Do you agree or disagree with that? Also, check out my other video where I go through every game that I played and I rank them from number 1 to number 42 on a tier list. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.